Hello, my name is Sasha Farba for TVP World, and now I have the pleasure and honor to speak to the Deputy Foreign Minister, Mr. Władysław Bartoszewski from the Polish Foreign Ministry. Thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Welcome.
Now, let's start. It's July 1st. There's a certain country now running the rotating presidency in the European Union, that's Hungary, with a slogan, "Make Europe Great Again," with a man himself who has not been the greatest fan of Europe. How worried is Poland, how worried should Europe be that Viktor Orbán is in this mix at such a level in Europe?
Well, we've got 27 members in the EU, and the presidency rotates for 6 months. Each country is having it. It's now a country which is maybe has a very contentious view of the workings of the European Union, but participated in the EU Parliament. It has MPs, Euro MPs. So there are parties which are skeptical of the EU, represented in Brussels after the last elections. But there are 26 others. And yes, it's a six months period, but the decisions are still made by the 27 prime ministers at the end of the day, and the European Commission, which will be formed shortly, and we'll see how it goes. It's not the end of the world, I would say. We suspect that maybe not many decisions that should be taken will be taken, but there is always light at the end of the tunnel, or the golden part at the end of the rainbow, because in 6 months Poland will take the presidency.
Yes, indeed. But we still have those 6 months to get through. You mentioned also Euro MEPs. We've just had about 2 weeks ago those European Parliament elections. As of, I think, also the last 24 hours, Mr. Orbán has also announced that he will try to form another new bloc, including I think certain elements of from Mr. Babis's old party removed, ANO, the Austrian FPÖ, Fidesz, maybe even Salvini might join. How much does this complicate things? I mean, this is now Orbán also sticking his hands in another area, an institution that is also quite crucial.
It doesn't make any difference whatsoever, for the very simple reason that we now, the EPP, the bloc, the Christian Democratic bloc to which my party belongs, and to which the largest party in the government in Poland, the Civic Union Platforma Obywatelska, belongs, together with the Social Democrats and Liberals, will have a majority of 400 Euro MPs in Euro Parliament, and as before, we will run the place. And our bloc, the EPP, has more. We sent to Brussels more Euro MPs than any other country apart from Germany. Mm-hmm. We've got, in the EPP, we are the second strongest representation. We do not see Parliament as a problem. Mm-hmm. The issue will maybe at the European Council level, when you have 27 prime ministers and you need sometimes unanimity for putting things through, but there's no change to what it was before. We had problems with Hungary before. We managed to overcome these problems largely, even if it took some time. It slowed us down, but it didn't stop us.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it looks like a council of those 27 will be much shorter, changeable. We have elections coming up. We're looking at France already. It's looking like Mr. Cohn is still there, but he's going to be busy with his internal politics. Maybe Rassemblement National on a bigger footing there, more control later for Le Pen. But also, if I look ahead for the next 6-10 months, Austria is going to have elections. We're looking at very strong results by the FPÖ there as well. Slovakia has changed. So it becomes a difference. It also almost becomes a difference between Poland and the Baltic and Nordic states. That is a line forming a very different political affiliation. Is there a split happening within Central Europe at this point in time?
Not really, because we of course have a Visegrad 4, which now became more Visegrad 2+2. As Hungary and Slovakia are not quite the same as Poland and the Czech Republic, but we've got a very strong cooperation with B3, which means the 3 Baltic states. We basically see eye to eye on most issues, and on war in Ukraine completely. We've got a very strong relations now with the Scandinavians. the Finns and Swedes as new NATO members. We've got extremely close relations now with Sweden, for instance, which was never bad, but is now much more active, and with Norway and with Denmark. So we are looking at having and that is a very good balance. And also, if you're talking about elections, soon enough there will be an election in Germany, and
which is also worrying.
It's not worrying because I think it's the CDU-CSU is very likely to be the major party, the 30% in the polls consistently. And I think their policy in terms of security and defense will be slightly different from the current setup. So of course, it's up to the Germans to elect whom they want. But I think we will cooperate with Germany and with the others. We have good links with France. I don't know who is going to. We don't know who is going to form the government in France, because the peculiarity of the French electoral system in the second round, with the three candidates vying for one seat, very often produce different results than what people imagine historically. So I wouldn't be that worried about this. And besides, EU is a very stable, old institution, and has gone through various crises, and we are not facing any. We face a certain populist wave, we face a certain nationalistic wave, but they do not have a majority in the European Parliament, and they won't have a majority in the Council. We'll see in the European Commission and in the Council of Prime Ministers. So we'll see. I'm not unduly worried. It's always a problem. It's the day-to-day politics, always a problem. If you look at the sanctions against Russia, we had 14 packages so far implemented, and there's always somebody who was against something because it was in their interest not to have it implemented. I won't give examples, but there's always an issue of discussion. But this is a democracy. Democracies. It's a very difficult organism. You've got 27 prime ministers who are used to run their own countries, and then they have to somehow get together and agree on things, and sometimes it takes a long time to do. But eventually it moves forward. So I think I wouldn't be unduly. We are not facing a revolution in Europe.
But at the same time, if you do look at the election results of the European Parliament, you do see that, although they're not united at this point in time, huge gains for more nationalist parties, far-right parties. Granted, the EPP has held on as the largest bloc, but they can't govern alone. And also, if we're looking at those numbers, von der Leyen needs over 361. It's no guarantee that this coalition will give her those votes. I mean, there's talk of bleeding of 10, 15%. Just talking to people in Brussels the last few days, it's no foregone conclusion that Ms. von der Leyen will hold that. Do you think that it's victory, but we're not past the post really, right? It all comes still to what happens in Strasbourg in the next few weeks.
It's a matter of negotiations. In a situation like that, it's always somebody is trying to get some advantages for themselves and trying to say, yes, we will support you as a candidate, but we want in exchange this and that. I mean, this is politics. It's negotiation. It's horse trading. I think Mrs. von der Leyen will be elected at the end, but there may be certain fractions who want to get something for themselves. This is how politics works. So I'm not particularly surprised.
So no worries there. Well, let's talk about Poland's position, because, I mean, as you said, in the EPP, notwithstanding the second biggest grouping there in terms of saying the most delegates to the European Parliament, obviously a more primary role now for Poland. Donald Tusk has been very much adamant about that, relinking Poland into the Western fold. Does that also now, in your mind, in your experience, translate into more, let's say, clout for Poland? Will we now expect, and where do you expect to see more Polish presence in Brussels, in Europe? Because arguably, as you said, the EPP won here in this country. It's obviously arguably with Donald Tusk's mandate that he has. He knows Brussels, he knows Europe. What about Poland's position? Can we expect more, and in which areas? Defense, higher commission roles? Where do you see that going in the future?
Well, I mean, of course, we are but we are back in Europe after 8 years of trying to say that the European Union is a foreign body and we are against it, although we are part of it and benefiting from it very hugely. And now we are playing a role. Donald Tusk is an incredibly experienced politician. He is the third-time Prime Minister of Poland, but also he spent his term in Brussels managing 27 prime ministers, which is like herding cats. I mean, it's an extremely difficult task, and he's learned. I've seen him when he was here 8 years ago. I see him now. I see him how he operates. I see him how he runs. Occasionally, I attend the government meetings instead of my boss, the minister. As number two, I'm sometimes in the government proceedings, and I see how his skill and moving things forward. He knows Europe better, European Union better than any other prime minister who participates in meetings in Brussels, simply because he's been doing that job himself. Yes, we are now much more engaged with Europe. We are also much more assertive. We don't say we don't want Europe. No, we want to play a role in Europe. We are the sixth largest economy in Europe, and we want to play a bigger role. And yes, we will be asking for various positions in the European Commission. It's not up to me to say what we were going to push for, because it's up to the Prime Minister. But certainly, we are, of course, interested in matters related to defense, because we are spending 4% of our GDP on defense, which is more than anybody else in Europe, apart from Russia. But Russia is spending about 8% of their GDP. They are already on a war economy footing. But in the EU, we are in NATO, we are number one. And yes, so defense is of our interest, because we have a war on our border, and we want that war to be won by Ukraine. We don't want to have a stalemate. We don't want to have some kind of temporary solution. We want that war to be won by Ukraine. For that, we need arms. We need to produce more ammunition, which we lack artillery shells. We need to produce more missile defenses. We have to. This is what Prime Minister Tusk was saying. Together with the Greek Prime Minister, we want to have these initiatives. We think it's wrong not to have a common purchasing of weapons by the EU. It's not against NATO. Almost every country in the EU is also in NATO, apart from some neutral countries, Austria, Ireland, Malta, Cyprus. But the rest are all in NATO. And we are
but
not...
Mr. Orbán has made it clear, though, that he does not want to be any part in trying to support militarily within NATO Ukraine. He made that very clear. It seems to be an agreement.
Fair enough, but we want to be prepared ourselves. It's not a question of producing weapons to send to Ukraine. It's a question of having weapons in case something happens. The war, from being a hybrid war or grey area kind of war run by the Russian Federation, if it's going to turn kinetic, proper war, we want to be prepared. And for that, we need to rearm.
But as you said, very much Poland back in Europe, and I think that's a very good thing. Mr. Bartoszewski, thank you so much for all that. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. That's Sasha Farbach for TVP World.